Speaking of sleep paralysis, a female colleague I worked with a few years back mentioned she'd been suffering from it for about a month. She changed departments with the new business year in April and had moved into a new apartment as well. It was May, so we joked that maybe she was just suffering from the May blues. Or maybe she'd moved into an apartment where a terrible crime had taken place. That would be terrifying, right? She claimed that this sometimes happened to her when she was exhausted, however, so she wasn't too worried about it. But then, in July, she suddenly quit without even a farewell party. We asked our boss what was going on, and apparently a man had been sneaking into her apartment at night and standing next to her bed. Sometimes he even got in and laid down beside her. Apparently she went to the police and matters were resolved, but it took such a heavy toll on her mental state that she quit. I don't know if she was a deep sleeper or maybe had a habit of drinking before bed, but it was amazing she didn't notice someone sneaking into her apartment for an entire month. I wonder if maybe the sleep paralysis was her unconscious mind trying to alert her of the danger. Or maybe some sort of power that pervert possessed. Hey guys, I'm your host, Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. The latest volume of Kowabana, Volume 16, is now available. If you want even more creepy tales of ghosts, haunted buildings, curses, mysterious rituals, and much more, make sure to check it out right now. And if you're looking for more to listen to, you can also find the audiobook for the first volume of Toshiden, either on our Patreon, Fourth Wall store, or various audiobook outlets, including Spotify and Audible. So don't miss out on that either if you're still looking for more. This week, we're looking at some bizarre tales that seem to defy explanation. Are they ghosts? People? Something else entirely? What's really going on here? First up, a group of old classmates meet for a reunion, but one of them apparently hasn't aged much, and he's acting rather weird. What has happened to him since the last time they all saw him? Find out in Class Reunion. This is a story about a class reunion I attended for the first time in a while. One day, I got a letter inviting me to a class reunion. It was for our junior high class, and our previous reunion took place when we were all 20. We were now 30, so that meant the last time we all got together was 10 years prior. Even though I had lots of close friends in junior high, by this point, we barely saw each other anymore. Thinking it would be nice to revive a few old friendships, I decided to go. Quite a few people turned up for the reunion, and things got pretty lively as we updated each other on what we'd all been up to over the years. We also reminisced about the old days, and it was overall pretty fun. Now that we were all 30, there were people who were starting to look like old uncles and aunties, and some guys who were already going bald too. Ignoring that I was one of them too, I stared at everyone and marveled at how old they were all getting. Most people had already gotten married too, and I started to panic a little as I was still single. We invited our old teacher as well, but it seemed he was ill, so unfortunately he wasn't able to join us. Once the main buffet section of the reunion was done, we decided to head to an izakaya bar to continue. Over half of us showed up. I didn't have work the following day, so I figured it would be fine to drink a little more than normal. Everyone was a little more tipsy than at the buffet, so we were all chatting freely when a new guest arrived. I'll call him A-kun. Back in junior high, A-kun didn't have any friends, and I don't remember ever talking to him myself either. Still, he attended our previous reunion, and I think he went around chatting to everyone just fine then. Still, he was a bit of a nervous guy, just like his junior high days. So he often stuttered and seemed to give up on what he was trying to say. Still, everyone was kind of drunk when he arrived, so we all welcomed him. "Hey! Well, if it isn't A. What's up? Get over here and join us." B, the organizer of the reunion, was the first to call him over. B and I were good friends, and he was one of the few classmates who I still kept in contact with at the time. Everyone then happily called out to him as well. "Hey, long time no see! Sit, sit! The party's just getting started. You came at the perfect time." A quietly sat down as instructed. Of course, I remembered him, but I was surprised at how young he still looked. He seemed a little lacking in energy, sure, but he looked exactly how I remembered him from our reunion 10 years prior. As someone whose hairline had receded at least 1 centimeter since then, I was a little jealous. But now, A was even quieter than before. He would nod or mutter a 1 or 2 word answer if addressed, but he never spoke first or tried to chime in of his own free will. "You want something to drink?" B asked, but he just nodded and didn't actually say what he wanted. "Alright, well, let's just get you a beer then. If you don't want it, I'll have it." But when his beer arrived, he didn't touch it, nor any of the snacks that were nearby. Something was up with him, and I don't think I was the only one thinking that way either. I was worried, like maybe work wasn't going well and he was depressed about it or something. As such, I tried to cheer him up. "Akon, my guy, you still look so young. I'm jealous. I look like a grandpa now." I laughed, but Akon just vaguely smiled and nodded. A few others then jumped in too. "Seriously, you haven't changed a bit. Did you find a stone mask or something?" "Some guys just don't age, huh? Must be nice." But A just smiled and said nothing. B, the organizer, then joined in. "I mean, are you even human?" he said with a laugh. He wasn't trying to make fun of him, nor was he actually serious. It was just a simple joke. But at that, A's demeanor suddenly changed. He trembled violently as he stared at the ground, his eyes wide open. "Ah, that wasn't very funny, was it?" B said, startled by his reaction. "My bad. I didn't mean to make fun of you or anything. I'm sorry." But A didn't even seem to notice him. He just continued trembling. The mood in the air changed and everyone shifted uncomfortably. While I felt a little bad for A, who was probably suffering from something mentally, I was also a little annoyed that his reaction to B's simple joke had basically ruined the night. "I'm sorry, really. Look, let's have another drink and forget all about it, yeah?" B said, standing up. Everyone started chatting again, trying to act like nothing had happened. But A's trembling got even worse, and soon his chair started rattling too. Something clearly wasn't right here. "Hey, are you okay?" I asked. Then A started acting strangely. His expression looked like a mixture of anger and laughter as he clapped the back of his hands together. Bang, bang, bang. He kept hitting them rhythmically. What the hell is wrong with this guy? Terrified, I barely even finished the thought before A's scream pierced my ears and he ran out of the bar. I'll never forget the look on his face at that precise moment. he looked just like a monster. We weren't the only ones confused. Other guests at the bar also looked around, dumbfounded at what had just happened. Naturally, we were no longer in the mood to keep drinking, so we decided it was time to call it a night and all went our separate ways. A few days later, B contacted me. He felt responsible for whatever set off A, so he contacted his parents to see what was wrong. He mentioned the reunion and what happened in a roundabout way and asked if they had heard anything from him. But their response was completely unexpected. They asked him if it was really true and which bar did we visit. Apparently, A had gone missing shortly after our last reunion, 10 years prior. His family had gotten the letter asking him to attend this one, but they were so busy that they forgot to reply. Of course, in the 10 years since he went missing, he hadn't once been home, nor did he have contact with any other classmates. So how he even found his way to the reunion was a mystery to me. And looking back on it now, the way he kept holding back at our previous reunion makes me wonder if perhaps there was something he really did want to tell us. 2 years have passed since then, and apparently they still haven't found A. Even if he's not doing so well, I pray that, at the very least, he is still alive somewhere. The man in this next story often works nights doing maintenance on all sorts of railway equipment, but one night he runs into something he still can't explain. Who or what was out there with him? Find out in Railway Equipment Maintenance. This is a kind of scary story that happened to me last summer, not involving ghosts. I do on-site work maintaining railway equipment and infrastructure. One day, we had to do some maintenance on the lift truck they use on the railway lines. This is a vehicle that can run on both railway tracks and regular roads. This truck has wheels that are stored underneath, and when you bring them out, it can run on the railway lines. After the last regular and freight trains had passed for the night, the plan was to put the lift truck on the tracks at midnight, then move it around 50 meters for some other workers to take over. Then, around 3 a.m, the plan was for it to move from the tracks to the road at the railway crossing. I'll deliberately leave the exact times a little vague. The handover went well, and for the next 2 hours, I just watched the other guys work. We were by an overpass in a residential area, and while the railway tracks were pitch black, the area near the crossing had streetlights, so it was rather bright. The only car I saw at the crossing was the occasional taxi, and there was no heavy machinery other than the lift truck, so generally it was quiet, other than the sound of the lift truck's engine. When I just started this job, I used to find this type of atmosphere at night kind of scary, but it wasn't like I ever saw any ghosts, so in time, I got used to it. Around 2:30 a.m, the contractors let us know they were done, and after helping get the lift truck ready to move, I started walking towards the crossing, checking that there were no obstacles on the tracks. After confirming the way was clear, I let the driver know over the wireless. "Sorry, I forgot to fasten the jack. Give me 5 minutes," one of the workers replied. With these older vehicles, the hydraulics could be a little weird, and even after storing the jack, things could come loose again. We still had some time until 3 a.m, so I waited at the crossing until they were done. Then, about 20 meters away, a person started walking towards the crossing. This was a city road entering the residential area that came from the intersection on the prefectural highway. A road just wide enough for 2 cars to pass at the same time. This man had his hat pulled down low. His posture was poor, and his way of walking seemed kind of awkward as well. It wasn't unusual to see elderly people out for a walk or jog around 5 a.m, but it wasn't even 3 yet. Maybe he's drunk, I thought, and then I contacted the workers over the wireless again. A pedestrian's coming, so feel free to take your time. Then I entered the crossing to help guide the man over. The man walked towards me on unsteady feet, but because his hat was pulled down and he was looking at the ground, I couldn't see his face. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience. Please, go ahead," I said when the man was about 5 meters away, showing him through, and he suddenly straightened up and looked right at me. I jumped in surprise when I saw his face. There was no face. It was all just hair. What the hell? I thought, and as he passed in front of me, his neck turned 90 degrees, and there was his face. I panicked a little, but looking closer, the man was wearing his clothes and hat backwards, and he was walking backwards as well, meaning what I thought was his face was actually the back of his head, and it was his face that was looking at me now. At first, it scared the crap out of me, but once I realized he was a person, I figured it would be best not to get too close. "What's your step?" I said, taking a few steps back myself to put some distance between us. When you work at places like this, you occasionally come across some weird old guys. Then the man looked at me and said something I couldn't make out. It kind of sounded like a small animal squeaking. "Oh, come on," I thought, trembling in fear. But the man just kept walking and went on his way. "We're all good over here," came a message through the wireless from the driver. "How about over there?" Panicking, I quickly replied and turned to look at the man. He had turned a corner leading into the residential area. He was hunched over again, and I couldn't see his face. But I could feel his eyes on me somehow. And now that I think of it, what on earth was up with his spine? We managed to move the lift truck without incident after that, but even though the job was done, my heart continued to pound and I struggled to focus. I spoke to the driver after we'd wrapped everything up, but he didn't really notice anything, other than an old guy with a limp passing by. But when I got back to the office, I asked an older colleague if he had ever seen anyone like that there, but he claimed he hadn't. The squeaking sounds that guy made honestly sounded like something I heard on TV a while back. Maybe from the ending of Dragon Ball. But played in reverse. When a family moves to a new neighborhood, the kids hear what sounds like a festival outside. However, when they look into it, it turns out there aren't any festivals nearby. What is it that they're hearing, and why can't anyone else apparently hear it? Find out in Festival Music. This story might not be that frightening in words, but actually experiencing it was chilling. We just moved to a really quiet neighborhood. Our house is near the railway tracks and the area is so quiet that we can hear whenever the trains pass. During the day, you can even hear exactly what the kids playing outside on the street are saying. So, I live with my parents, older sister, and younger brother. But when my parents went shopping with my older sister one day, My brother and I stayed home. Our sister always takes forever at the shops, and my brother is still really young as well. Anyway, setting that aside, suddenly, my brother said something to me. "Hey, is there a festival nearby?" Huh? I thought. But when I listened closely, it sounded like I could hear festival drums outside, just like he said. "Seriously?" I said. We both got worked up, and as we ran outside, our family were just getting back. "Where on earth do you think you're going at this hour?" our mother said. "There's a festival somewhere nearby," I replied. At that, they all seemed confused. Huh? I can't hear anything. But there was no way we could hear the sounds of a festival inside the house, but not outside. Yet our parents and sister said they couldn't hear a thing. And when we checked, there really were no festivals nearby on that day. My brother and I chalked it up to mishearing things. But a week later, when I was home alone, I heard those same sounds again. Dong, dong, dong. Curious, I decided to step outside and have a look. Putting on my sandals, I went outside. It sounded like it was coming from the area near the station, so I started heading in that direction. Our neighbours were an elderly couple who had lived in the area forever, and although we had just moved in, they were super kind to us. The elderly woman was cleaning in front of the house as I walked by, but suddenly she put down her broom and grabbed my arm. "Can you hear a festival?" she asked. I was scared. It was like she read my mind. "Yes," I said, nodding. Her face hardened immediately. "You mustn't go," she said, squeezing my arm even harder. She was normally so kind and gentle, so it scared the hell out of me. "We don't hold any festivals around here. Ever. So, you mustn't go." She wouldn't tell me why, but her face was dead serious, so I couldn't argue with her. I just nodded in response. When she finally let go of me, she then leaned in close to my face. "You just ignore those sounds, okay? You can talk to people about them if you want, but you mustn't go towards them." Again, her face was dead serious. She wasn't joking. Terrified, I nodded over and over, and grabbing my arm where she had gripped me, I ran home as fast as I could. I still wonder what would have happened if I went to that festival that day. Apparently my younger brother hasn't heard anything since then, but I can still hear those sounds. In fact, as I'm writing this, I'm home alone, and again, I can hear those same sounds. I'm honestly a big chicken, so I don't know what I should do. Our neighbour says that the sounds will leave me alone if I keep ignoring them, but I wish they'd go away already. Thanks for listening. A man who used to work nights at a call centre shares a few of the more bizarre experiences he had there. Was the job itself cursed, or does it just attract bizarreness to it? Find out in Night Call Centre. This happened around 10 years ago, when I was working the night shift at a call centre. 1. Soon after I started working there, I kept getting this sensation, like a cold hand touching my lower back while I was on calls. But when I turned around, nobody was there. When our team leader noticed this, he came over to me and said, "Something's touching you, right? Feel free to move to another location." "Does this sort of thing often happen here?" I asked. "Just that seat," he replied. After that, I made sure never to sit there again. maybe it was the spirit of a lusty woman. I'm sure some folks are into that sort of thing. 2. A mysterious incident. I was working as usual when suddenly I heard a strange sound on the other end of the line, like kiraring. Then the person on the other end sounded like they were coughing or gagging or something. Sorry, I can't describe it very well. Of course, I couldn't hear what they were trying to say, so I apologized and asked if they could repeat it. But then, suddenly, the phone hung up. Looking around, everyone looked just as confused as I did. The phone died. What on earth was that kirang sound? Everyone started talking at once. I figured it was probably some crossed wires somewhere, but being at a call center during the middle of the night, I couldn't help but think of all sorts of possibilities. After that, the phone rang as usual, and the person on the other end sounded normal too. But strangely, we never got any complaints from customers who were cut off while ordering, and we never got any complaints that goods never arrived either. 3. This wasn't directly related to me, but our call center had a toll-free number, so we often got calls from nutcases or people who hung on the line for way too long. Like perverts who called to order women's underwear and started asking the female phone operators about how the underwear felt to wear or what size they were. There were also women who would suddenly start singing when someone answered the phone, and stuff like that. We even had something like a blacklist of callers. One of them was a woman who was obsessed with one man in particular. If anyone else answered, she would scream, "Put A-san on the phone right now!" If he wasn't there, she'd scream and cry for around an hour. But if he was there, she'd just try to make small talk with him. Being that we were in the service industry, we couldn't just ignore her, so we were at a loss for what to do. One day, A was working as usual, but something about him seemed off. His eyes were darting around and he seemed to be pleading for help. I told our team leader and he changed operators, but then that woman started screaming again, and so our leader had to deal with it himself. When I asked A what was wrong, he said, "That old woman suddenly said, 'You shouldn't eat too many bento boxes from the convenience store. You bought one yesterday on the way home from work too, right? You shouldn't buy the same one 3 days in a row. Make sure you buy a salad too. And it's healthier for you to walk than bike. Looks like you've put on some weight recently. And isn't it about time to get out last year's brown pea coat? It's starting to get cold.'" Seemed she started meddling in his personal affairs. But not only that, she got everything right, even his brown pea coat that he did actually own. A only started taking her calls around 6 months earlier, so there was no way she could have known what coat he was wearing a year ago. She also kept talking about other things from his private life, like the girlfriend he broke up with 2 years prior, which left him stunned and suspicious. It was possible that she just happened to be in the neighborhood, but could it really be nothing more than a coincidence? A quit work after that, and the woman stopped calling as well. The incident ended in mystery. 4. This story was the scariest for me personally. The toilet at work had a motion detector, so the lights would automatically turn on whenever someone entered. However, if you were in there a long time without moving, then the lights would automatically turn off. When I was in there one day, the lights went off, and I tried moving both my hands while I was sitting on the toilet to see if the detector could sense me, but nothing happened. As I finished my business in the dark, I fumbled in the dark as I exited the stall. Right as I was about to leave, the lights suddenly turned on. Seriously? There's only a sensor at the entrance? I thought. But when I turned around, there was a person behind me. And they vanished in an instant. It happened so quickly that I couldn't clearly see them, but I think they were wearing navy blue clothes. The sensor should have detected a person coming in after me, but the lights didn't turn on. So I guess I was hallucinating or seeing things. But it was seriously scary. An elderly woman moves in next to two young brothers, but at night, one of them can hear what sounds like a young woman in her apartment as well. Is it her grandchild or is something else going on here? Find out in Old Lady Next Door. A while back, I lived with my young brother who dropped out of high school. He was a carpenter's apprentice, while I was attending university. A lively old woman in her 80s lived next to us, and shortly after she moved in, she quickly made friends with other elderly women. We often saw them standing around chatting, and when she saw my brother and I, she often approached us as well. She claimed her husband used to be a carpenter as well, and she was able to live alone now because of the pension she received by being a former teacher. She also told us her eldest son's child was also attending university this year. But honestly, I didn't care about any of that. Our apartment had 2 bedrooms, a dining room and kitchen. My brother and I took one room each, and mine was apparently next to the old woman's on the other side of the wall. One day, I heard a young girl's laughter coming from that room. The old woman said she had a grandchild in university, so I thought that perhaps she came to visit. I couldn't help but let my imagination run away from me, wondering what might happen if we were to meet. And after that, I occasionally heard laughter coming from the old woman's bedroom, so I figured that her grandchild came to see her quite frequently. I was heavily into online gaming at the time, so it was usually around 4 in the morning by the time I went to bed. One day, I think it was around 4:30 a.m. when our guild finally disbanded for the night. As I was getting ready to go to bed, again, I heard laughter coming from the room next door. Huh? Her granddaughter is there at this hour? Did she spend the night? I thought. But then, I heard the old woman calling out for her husband. Her voice sounded sad and almost heart-rending. But that was immediately followed by a young woman's laughter again. Then, a bell rang, like the kind you might find on a family altar. And again, the old woman called out for her husband. Once more, it was immediately followed by a young woman's laughter. Honestly, a chill ran down my spine. The old woman's voice didn't sound normal, and what I previously thought was a lively young woman's voice now sounded more like someone mocking the old woman. One thought immediately popped into my head. Elderly abuse. Was her granddaughter after her inheritance or something? All sorts of thoughts ran through my mind, but, of course, I had no real answer. Around 5 a.m., my brother got up to get ready for work. I went to the kitchen to speak to him about what was going on. Now that you mention it, I haven't seen her around lately, my brother replied. It was true. We used to see her standing around chatting all the time, and she'd often come over to us claiming she had leftover food, or she cooked too much and wanted us to have some. Then she'd use that opportunity to talk our ears off. But over the last month or so, she stopped doing that entirely. Suddenly worried, I wrapped up some leftover food I got from my parents, and then went over to the old woman's apartment to give it to her in thanks. When she answered the door, her hair was a mess and she looked lifeless. "Ah, thank you," she muttered as I gave her the food, and then she quickly went back inside. But I was still worried about her, so I paid close attention to any voices coming from her apartment after that. However, I never heard anything other than that same shrill laughter, and the old woman pitifully calling out for her husband. One time, I grabbed my younger brother so he could hear it as well. He put his ear to the wall, and the moment he heard that laughter, his face went pale. "This is bad. Real bad," he said, trembling in fear. One day, I heard a bunch of noise coming from the old woman's room. Shortly after that, a woman who called herself the old woman's daughter and her husband came to see us. "We haven't heard from my mother in a while. We checked her apartment, but nobody is there. Do you know if she went somewhere, perhaps?" they said. Of course, there was nothing I could do to help them. "I'll help you look," I said, offering my assistance, but after doing a general sweep of the area, we couldn't find her anywhere, so the woman went to the police. In the meantime, they also let me look around the old woman's apartment, but unlike the last time I saw it, it was now a complete mess. The daughter claimed that her mother had been showing signs of dementia for a while now. There was nothing I could do to help, so I returned to my own apartment, and a few hours later, I heard they found the old woman wandering around barefoot in a large store about 1 kilometer away. Someone had picked her up and was bringing her back, and the daughter thanked me for my help. I debated whether I should mention anything about her granddaughter maybe abusing her, but in the end, I couldn't bring myself to say anything. After that, the old woman moved out, and I saw her grandchild for the first time. Her voice was clearly different to the one I heard, and apparently her university was really far away. We lived in Kanto, her university was in Kansai, and she lived there most of the year. I chatted with my brother about it when he got home. "Maybe it was a symptom of dementia," he said. "Or maybe she's developing some sort of mental illness." Then, after a pause, he asked me a question. "But was that shrill laughter really the only thing you heard coming from that room?" "Yeah? Why?" "No, just... I heard a woman say something right after she laughed. It sounded like she said, 'Die,' my brother said, his expression turning dark. And finally this week, several families living in a neighborhood are visited by the same man ringing their doorbell late at night, asking for Shiho-san. Who is this man and what does he want with this woman they don't even know? Find out in Shiho-san. One day, the people who lived in the house across from us warned us of a weird guy they'd seen. Apparently, he rang their doorbell at 1 a.m. Of course, they were all in bed, so at first they ignored it. But the man kept ringing the doorbell over and over. So, unable to stand it any longer, the husband got up to deal with him. His wife stood by his side, holding her phone just in case she had to quickly call the police. The husband then asked calmly through the door, "What do you want at this hour? Is there some sort of emergency?" I have an appointment with Shiho-san," a man answered. "Please let me in." Nobody by the name of Shiho lived in that house, and it was a regular house the family had lived in for a long time, so there was no way he could be asking about someone who used to live there either. The husband told the man as much and then asked him to leave. "But we have an appointment. I remember it, so..." The man refused to leave, So in the end, they had to call the police. They soon arrived, but by then, the man was gone. As we were eating dinner, my mother informed us of what had happened, and said the couple across the road warned us to be careful, because that man might also show up here as well. And that night, after we double-checked everything was locked, someone also rang our doorbell. It was a little after midnight, and I was in the living room with my father. I honestly didn't think that guy would show up at our house, and despite being two grown men, my father and I both trembled in fear. Before calling the police, we agreed to check who it was first. Our intercom didn't have a camera, so I peeked through a gap in the curtains. A man in a light brown coat and black hat stood in the enclosed entrance area. We do live in a snowy area, after all. He had rubber boots on and was of average height. His head was down and his face hidden behind his collar. And as he stood there like that, he kept ringing the doorbell. My father warned me not to keep looking at him, so I quickly withdrew. But that absolutely had to be the weird guy they warned us about. So we called the police. While we waited, my father and I decided to restrain the man so he couldn't run. We would be heroes. Around 3 minutes had passed by this time, and the entire time, the man kept ringing the doorbell. My father went over to the entrance and then spoke to the man through the frosted glass door. "Who is it?" I have an appointment with Shiho-san." "What's your name?" Is it an emergency?" "I have an appointment with Shiho-san. Please let me in. I have an appointment," the man said, leaving pauses between each sentence. Of course, there was nobody in our house by the name of Shiho either. "There's nobody here by that name," my father said. "You must have the wrong house." "Ah, I remember our appointment, so..." the man kept repeating. But then, the figure on the other side of the glass vanished as soon as the police car arrived. "Excuse me, this is the police," the officer said. But for some reason, he was knocking on the outside of the enclosed entrance area. When my father opened the front door, the enclosed area where that man was ringing the doorbell was still locked. Of course, this was a sliding door that you couldn't lock from the outside. And come to think of it, we didn't hear the door sliding when that man disappeared either. I was pretty frightened, but my father didn't seem to care. He explained the situation and what the man looked like to the officer, and then told him that the same thing had happened across the road the night before too. He mentioned the man was here just a moment ago, but the officer apparently didn't see anyone suspicious nearby. However, it had snowed that night, and there were footprints in it. The officer said he'd follow the tracks and send a few cars out to patrol, and if the man returned, he wanted us to contact him right away. He then told us to lock up and be careful going out late at night, before leaving. I asked my mother, who was peeking from the stairs, whether she had locked the enclosed entrance, and she said she was sure she did. "Don't worry about it. It's a pity we weren't able to get him first, though," my father said with a laugh. We checked all the locks again before finally going to bed. Still, I didn't get much sleep, although I did feel a little better seeing a police car go past around 3 a.m. But the next day, that same man rang another neighbour's doorbell. Seemed he went around to a different house, including ours, for 4 nights in a row, ringing the doorbells and saying that he had an appointment with Shiho-san. After the 4th night, nobody reported seeing him again, but I didn't hear that he'd been arrested either. there wasn't any information on what he looked like either. And so, the new year arrived, and I went back to my own apartment where I lived alone. Apparently, a week later, the house across from ours found a folded piece of paper in their mailbox. Shiho wasn't here. I found her. Thank you very much. My mother phoned to tell me about it, but that guy rang our doorbell too, so at the very least, he could have apologized to us too. A massive thank you and shout out to this week's Kami tier members, Scarly, Emerald, and Kenneth Kawamoto. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show, so thank you very much. Don't forget to check out Kowabana Volume 16, out right now, and check out our merchandise store at kowabana-shop.fourthwall.com. And if you'd like to chat about this week's stories, come and join us in the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/KowabanaJapan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys, stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.